Welcome to Cafe Stories. Tonight we step into the polished heart of Mayfair, where within the walls of Beaumont & Co., garments are tailored not only from silk and thread, but from vanity, rivalry, and desire. This is Poirot and the Tailor of Artifice, a tale born from the charm and precision of Agatha Christie's world, yet spun entirely in our own voice, with fresh deceit woven through the fabric of her timeless mysteries. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you like this theme music, or shall I change it for our next mystery? I read your comments and truly value your thoughts. They guide what comes next for this channel. Each story you hear, the writing, the narration, takes hours to craft. So when you like, comment, or subscribe, it truly helps Cafe Stories continue to grow. If you'd like to go further, you can become a member for ad-free exclusive episodes. Link is in the description. Now the scissors are laid down, the mirror waits, and in the quiet of the fitting room, the truth prepares to be measured and cut. Chapter 1. The Last Fitting. The establishment of Victor Beaumont occupied a distinguished corner of Mayfair, its discreet brass nameplate polished to perfection, its windows dressed with silk curtains of an exquisite shade of dove grey. It was the sort of place where duchesses and actresses, industrialists and diplomats came to be fitted for garments that transcended mere clothing and approached art. On that grey morning, in October 1932, however, the salon's usual atmosphere of hushed elegance had been shattered entirely. Hercule Poirot descended from the taxicab with his customary precision, adjusting his hat to the exact angle he preferred and smoothing his gloves before approaching the entrance. A young constable stood guard at the door, his face pale beneath his helmet. "Inspector Dubois is expecting you, sir," the constable said, stepping aside with evident relief. Poirot entered the salon. The main room was a symphony of cream and gold, with mirrors reflecting the morning light, and bolts of fabric arranged with mathematical precision along one wall. A woman sat on one of the velvet chairs, her face composed but her hands gripping a handkerchief. She wore black, though whether for mourning or mere elegance, it was difficult to say. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot!" Inspector Armand Dubois emerged from a corridor at the rear of the salon. He was a neat man with a trim moustache and intelligent eyes. "Thank you for coming so promptly." "But naturally," Poirot replied. "You said the circumstances were peculiar." "Peculiar indeed." Dubois lowered his voice. "Victor Beaumont, the proprietor, was found hanged in his private fitting room this morning. The door was locked from the inside." "Suicide, then, it would appear?" Dubois' expression grew troubled. "That was my first thought. Yet there are details that disturb me, Monsieur Poirot. The knot, for one thing. It is most elaborate, a sailor's knot, and the room itself." He paused. "Perhaps it is better if you see for yourself." They proceeded down the corridor, past several fitting rooms with their curtained entrances. At the end stood a door of polished mahogany, now standing open. Two men were visible inside, a police surgeon and a photographer who had just finished his work. The private fitting room of Victor Beaumont was a masterpiece of refined taste. Mirrors covered two walls, creating an illusion of infinite space. A Persian carpet lay upon the floor, its colours muted and harmonious. Against one wall stood an ornate desk bearing a crystal decanter and glass. The fabrics displayed here were of the finest quality, arranged with an artist's eye for colour and texture. Victor Beaumont himself hung from an exposed beam near the centre of the room, the rope around his neck secured with an intricate knot. He had been a man of perhaps 50 years, well dressed even in death, his features handsome, though now distorted. Poirot stood very still, his green eyes moving slowly across the scene. He said nothing, but Dubois had learned to respect these silences. "The key was in the lock on the inside," Dubois explained. "The window is too small for a man to pass through, and there is no other entrance. His brother discovered him at 8 o'clock this morning, when Victor failed to appear for breakfast." "The time of death?" "The doctor estimates between 10 and midnight, last evening." Poirot moved forward with delicate steps, examining the rope, the beam, the position of the furniture. His eyes narrowed as he studied the surface of the desk, then lifted to the beam from which the body hung. There was something about the dust there, a slight disturbance in its even coating. "Most interesting," he murmured. "This room, it is always so neat." According to everyone we've spoken to, Victor Beaumont was obsessed with order. Everything had its place. "Précisément." Poirot's forefinger traced a small arc in the air. "Order and method. Yet here—" He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Inspector, you have spoken with the family?" "Briefly. His wife Isabel is in the salon. His brother Leo is upstairs in considerable distress, and his business partner, Julian Devereux, arrived 20 minutes ago." "The wife, she discovered nothing during the night?" "She claims to have retired early with a headache and took a sleeping draught. They maintained separate bedrooms." Poirot's eyebrows rose fractionally. He turned once more to survey the room, his gaze lingering on the crystal decanter with its amber contents, the single glass beside it. "This Victor Beaumont," he said softly. "He was a man who had enemies, perhaps?" Dubois gave a short laugh. "In business, assuredly, but beloved by his clients, Monsieur Poirot. An artist, they called him, a genius with fabric and form." "Ah, yes, the artistic temperament." Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "It can be most difficult for those who must live in close proximity to genius. Most difficult indeed." He requested a few more minutes alone in the room, which Dubois granted. When Poirot emerged, his expression was thoughtful, his eyes distant, as though his little grey cells were already arranging facts into their proper order. The woman in black still waited in the salon, and Poirot observed her carefully as he passed. Her composure was remarkable, her face pale but controlled. As their eyes met briefly, he saw something there. Fear, perhaps, or calculation, or both. Inspector Dubois accompanied him to the entrance. "You will take the case, Monsieur Poirot?" The Belgian detective adjusted his hat with precision, his hands smoothing his gloves. "But yes, mon ami, there are here certain features that intrigue Poirot. This apparent suicide that does not satisfy the little grey cells. This room of perfect order with its single inconsistency. And the people, the people are always the most fascinating element, are they not?" He paused on the threshold, his voice dropping. "Tell me, Inspector, do you believe Victor Beaumont took his own life?" Dubois hesitated. "The evidence suggests it." "The evidence, yes, but evidence, it can be arranged, can it not?" "It can be made to suggest many things." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "I think, Inspector, that this case will prove most instructive indeed." He descended the steps to the street, his mind already categorizing, analyzing, arranging the facts with the methodical precision that had made him the greatest detective in Europe. Chapter 2. False Stitches. Hercule Poirot returned to the Beaumont salon that afternoon, arriving with the punctuality that was second nature to him. The establishment remained closed to clients, a black wreath upon the door serving as silent announcement of the tragedy within. Inspector Dubois met him in the main salon, where the mirrors now reflected a scene far removed from the elegant fittings they usually witnessed. "I have arranged for you to speak with the staff first, Monsieur Poirot," Dubois said. "Madame Colette, the head seamstress, has been with the establishment for 15 years. If anyone knows the inner workings of this place, it is she. Madame Colette proved to be a woman of perhaps 55 years, her grey hair arranged in a neat chignon, her black dress severe but well cut. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, her posture erect, her eyes red-rimmed, but dry. "Madame," Poirot began, settling himself across from her with his characteristic precision, "you have worked for Monsieur Beaumont for many years, n'est-ce pas?" 15 years, monsieur. I came to him when the salon first opened." Her voice was steady, tinged with a faint accent that suggested origins in the provinces. "He was a genius, a true artist." "Ah, yes, an artist." Poirot stroked his moustache gently. "And artists, they are not always easy to work for, I think." A flicker crossed her face. Monsieur Beaumont had exacting standards, but that is what made him great. Précisément. And his relationships with others here, with his wife, his brother, Monsieur Devereux, they were harmonious. Madame Colette's hands tightened almost imperceptibly in her lap. "Madame Beaumont is a lady of great refinement. The marriage was, as many marriages are among people of quality. Which is to say, they maintained separate lives, monsieur. It is not uncommon in such circles." Poirot allowed a moment of silence to develop before continuing. "And Monsieur Léo Beaumont, the brother?" Here Madame Colette's composure wavered. "Monsieur Léo is a talented young man, but he lived in his brother's shadow. It was—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It was not always easy for him." "You observed tensions between them?" "Only the day before yesterday, monsieur. I was working late, finishing alterations for Lady Worthington, and I heard raised voices from the private fitting room. Monsieur Léo was shouting. I had never heard him raise his voice before. He said things about stolen ideas, about never receiving credit for his designs." She looked down at her hands. Monsieur Victor could be dismissive of others' contributions. And what was Monsieur Victor's response? "He laughed, monsieur, a cold laugh. He said that Leo had always been a mere copyist, that true artistry could not be learned or stolen, only possessed." Poirot made a small note in his pocket-book. "Most illuminating, madame. And Monsieur Devereux, what is your opinion of him?" "Monsieur Julien is the practical one. He manages the finances, deals with suppliers, ensures the salon runs smoothly. Without him, Monsieur Victor's genius would have remained unappreciated. Yet it was always Monsieur Victor who received the acclaim, the invitations, the recognition." She hesitated. Monsieur Julien never complained, but one could see that it troubled him. "He was ambitious, then?" "No, monsieur, that is not quite it. He was overlooked. There is a difference." After Madame Colette departed, Poirot interviewed 3 other staff members, each adding small details to the portrait of Victor Beaumont and his establishment. A pattern emerged of a man brilliant but difficult, generous with praise for his creations but miserly with acknowledgement of others' contributions. Julien Devereux was summoned next. He was a man of about 40, well-dressed, but without Victor's flamboyant artistry in his attire. His face was pale, his manner controlled, but tense. "Monsieur Devereux," Poirot began, "you were Monsieur Beaumont's partner for how long?" 8 years. I joined him when he needed capital to expand the salon." Devereux's voice was measured, careful. "I provided the financial expertise he lacked." "And your relationship was cordial?" "Cordial enough. Victor was the creative force. I was the business mind. It was an effective partnership." "Effective," Poirot repeated softly. An interesting choice of words. Not perhaps harmonious or pleasant, but effective. Devereux's jaw tightened slightly. Victor was not an easy man to work with, Monsieur Poirot. I won't pretend otherwise now that he's dead, but I respected his talent. You have a background in the merchant navy, I understand. The question seemed to catch Devereux off guard. Years ago, yes, before I entered the business world. Why do you ask? Oh, mais non, it is nothing. Merely that the knot used in the rope, it was a sailor's knot, most unusual for a landlocked tailor to employ, n'est-ce pas? Devereux's face went rigid. Are you suggesting— Poirot suggests nothing, he merely observes, and the little grey cells, they store away facts for later consideration. After Devereux left, visibly shaken, Inspector Dubois handed Poirot a letter. This was found in Beaumont's desk, from a rival tailor, Alaric Stone. Poirot read it with interest. The language was heated, accusing Victor of stealing clients and designs, threatening to expose his unscrupulous methods to society. The tone bordered on the violent. Most interesting, Poirot murmured. Though threats written in letters are rarely followed through, the person who truly means harm, he does not announce it in writing, n'est-ce pas? Perhaps, but we must investigate it nonetheless. But certainly. Poirot folded the letter carefully. And now, Inspector, I should like to speak with Madame Beaumont. It is time, I think, to understand the domestic arrangements of this household. Dubois led him to a small sitting room on the first floor, where Isabelle Beaumont waited. She was a woman of perhaps 35, elegant and composed, her beauty of the refined, understated variety. Her black dress was perfectly cut, her pale hands unadorned, save for a wedding ring. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly. Inspector Dubois said you wished to see me. If you please, madame. I know this must be most distressing for you. My husband is dead. Yes, it is distressing. Her voice was level, almost toneless. Poirot settled into a chair, his eyes studying her with the intensity that many found disconcerting. You retired early the night of your husband's death? I had a severe headache. I took a sleeping draught, and heard nothing until morning. And your marriage, madame? It was a happy one? For the first time, a faint colour touched her cheeks. That is a personal question, Monsieur Poirot. In a murder investigation, madame, all questions are personal. She met his gaze directly. We were not unhappy. Victor was devoted to his work. I had my own interests. The phrase hung in the air, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Poirot let the silence extend before rising with a slight bow. As he and Dubois descended the stairs, the inspector spoke quietly. There are rumours about Madame Beaumont. Discreet inquiries suggest she has been seen in the company of Monsieur Henri Delacroix, the diplomat, alone at hours that might be considered compromising. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Ah, yes, most interesting. The threads of this case, they grow more tangled with each hour. They reached the main salon, and Poirot paused to adjust his hat in one of the many mirrors, ensuring it sat at precisely the correct angle. His reflection showed a small, neat man with an air of supreme confidence in his own abilities. The little grey cells were working now, filing away each fact, each observation, each nuance of expression and tone. The truth lay somewhere in this elegant establishment, hidden among the silks and secrets, waiting for order and method to illuminate it. Chapter 3. The Hidden Pattern. 3 days had passed since the death of Victor Beaumont, and Inspector Dubois had not been idle. He arrived at Poirot's comfortable flat in the late afternoon, bearing a folder of documents and an expression of grim satisfaction. "I believe we are making progress, Monsieur Poirot," he said, settling into the chair that Poirot indicated. My investigations have uncovered several matters of considerable interest." Poirot's servant brought tea, which Dubois accepted gratefully. The Belgian detective sat with his customary precision, his hands folded, his green eyes alert. "Eh bien, Inspector, you have news for Poirot?" "Indeed." Dubois opened his folder. "First, regarding Julian Devereux, I had an accountant examine the salon's books. There are irregularities, small amounts withdrawn here and there, expenses that seem inflated, payments to suppliers that don't quite match the invoices. Embezzlement? It appears so. Over the past 2 years, approximately £3,000 have been diverted from the business. The methods are clever, nothing too obvious, but the pattern is clear to a trained eye." Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "And Monsieur Devereux, he would have known that discovery was inevitable? An audit, a closer examination, these things happen in business." "Precisely. Victor Beaumont was known to be careless about financial matters, but even he might have noticed eventually." Dubois leaned forward. "It provides a compelling motive, does it not? Devereux kills Beaumont before the theft is discovered, hoping to cover his tracks in the confusion following the death." "Perhaps. And yet—" Poirot's eyes grew distant. £3,000 over 2 years. It is not so very much for a man who manages a successful establishment. The risk seems disproportionate to the reward, n'est-ce pas? Dubois looked slightly deflated. "You do not find it significant?" "Au contraire, I find it most significant. But perhaps not in the way you suppose." "What else have you discovered?" The inspector consulted his notes. "Madame Beaumont's activities have been of interest. She has indeed been conducting an affair with Henri Delacroix, the French diplomat. They were seen together at a discreet hotel in Bloomsbury on several occasions earlier this year." "The staff at this hotel, they can confirm the times?" "Yes, the proprietor remembers them particularly because Delacroix is a notable figure. However, the visit ceased approximately 3 months ago." "And Delacroix himself? You have spoken with him?" "I have. He admits the affair quite openly, though with considerable embarrassment. He says it ended amicably 3 months ago. Madame Beaumont broke it off, saying she could not continue to deceive her husband." Dubois paused. He seemed genuinely distressed by Victor's death, though whether from guilt or genuine sorrow I cannot say. Poirot rose and began to pace, his hands behind his back. "So, we have a wife conducting an illicit liaison, a business partner engaging in embezzlement, and a brother with a violent quarrel fresh in memory. It is almost too convenient, n'est-ce pas?" "How do you mean?" "Each person with a motive, each person with opportunity. It is like a puzzle where all the pieces fit too neatly." He turned sharply. "What of Leo Beaumont? You have investigated him also?" "Less to find there, I'm afraid. He lives modestly on the salary Victor paid him, has no debts, no obvious vices. The quarrel Madame Colette mentioned seems to have been an isolated incident." "Ah, but was it isolated, or merely the one time when the restraint broke?" Poirot tapped his forehead. "The little grey cells, they wonder about Monsieur Leo, a man who has lived in his brother's shadow for many years. What resentments might accumulate in such a situation?" Dubois produced another document. "There's one more thing. This letter arrived at the salon the morning of the murder. It's from Alaric Stone, the rival tailor who sent that threatening letter we found." Poirot read it carefully. The tone was more measured than the previous correspondence, but no less bitter. Stone accused Victor of stealing a client, Lady Ashford, through underhanded tactics and demanded a meeting to settle the matter, like gentlemen. "Lady Ashford?" Poirot murmured. "You have interviewed her?" "I have. She confirms that she left Stone's establishment for Beaumont 6 months ago. but insists it was simply because she preferred Victor's artistry. She seems quite genuine in her distress over his death. And Monsieur Stone? Where was he on the night in question? At his club in St. James's until midnight, then home to his flat in Kensington. His housekeeper confirms his return. The timing makes it difficult, though not impossible, for him to have committed the crime. Poirot returned to his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Inspector, I should like to visit the fitting room once more. There is something there that troubles me. Something about the arrangement of objects, the position of things. Of course. Shall we go now?" "Mais oui. The light will still be good for another hour." They arrived at the salon to find it shuttered and silent. A constable admitted them, and they made their way to the private fitting room. The body had been removed, but otherwise the room remained as it had been found. Poirot stood in the centre, slowly turning in a complete circle. His eyes moved from the desk with its decanter to the beam above, from the Persian carpet to the arrangement of fabrics along one wall. "The dust on the beam," he said softly. "You see, Inspector? Here, where the rope was attached, there is a disturbance in the dust, as though something else had rested there, briefly, before being removed." Dubois squinted upward. "I see it. But what could it mean?" "That is what Poirot must determine." He moved to the desk, examining the decanter and glass. This cognac, it was Victor's favourite? According to the staff, yes. He would have a glass most evenings before retiring. Poirot lifted the glass, holding it to the light. "It has been cleaned?" "No, we left everything as it was." "Curieux." Poirot set it down with great care. "And the rope? It was kept where?" "In a storage cupboard downstairs, used for tying parcels, according to Madame Colette." "Accessible to all?" "Yes." Poirot examined the knot on the severed rope, his fingers tracing its elaborate curves. This sailor's knot, it requires knowledge, skill, not something one improvises in a moment of desperation. "Which points to Devereux," Dubois said with some satisfaction. "His naval background, or to someone who wished us to think of Devereux." Poirot's voice was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "In a case such as this, Inspector, we must question everything that seems obvious. The murderer, he is clever. He has arranged things just so to point our attention in certain directions." They left the salon as dusk was falling, the street lamps beginning to glow along Mayfair's elegant thoroughfares. Poirot walked in silence, his head bowed in thought, his hands clasped behind his back. The little grey cells were working furiously now, sorting through evidence and testimony, weighing possibilities, detecting the faint inconsistencies that would ultimately reveal the truth. Somewhere in the accumulation of facts lay the pattern he sought, the true pattern, not the false one the murderer had so carefully constructed. But patience was required, order and method. The truth would emerge in its own time, as it always did when Hercule Poirot applied his formidable intellect to a problem. Of that he had no doubt whatsoever. Chapter 4. Poirot takes measure. The following morning found Hercule Poirot once again at the Beaumont salon, this time accompanied by a distinguished gentleman whom Inspector Dubois eyed with some curiosity. "Inspector, permit me to introduce Dr. Harrington," Poirot said. "He is a specialist in toxicology and has been kind enough to assist Poirot in a small matter." Dr. Harrington was a man of about 60, with silver hair and the bearing of one accustomed to being consulted on matters of importance. He nodded to Dubois before turning to Poirot. "You wish me to examine the body again, I understand?" "If you would be so kind. There are certain questions about the time and manner of death that trouble the little grey cells." Dubois frowned. "But the police surgeon already conducted a thorough examination. Death by hanging, he concluded. The broken neck, the marks on the throat, all consistent with such a death. May we, all consistent. But was the hanging the cause of death, or merely the appearance of the cause? That is what Poirot wishes to determine. Dr. Harrington spent an hour with the body at the morgue, while Poirot returned to the private fitting room to conduct what he termed certain experiments. He had brought with him a measuring tape, a notebook, and several lengths of rope. Inspector Dubois watched with growing bewilderment as the Belgian detective climbed carefully onto a chair, then measured distances and angles with meticulous precision. "What exactly are you looking for, Monsieur Poirot?" "For the truth, mon ami, always for the truth." Poirot descended from the chair and examined the Persian carpet beneath his feet. "Tell me, Inspector, when a man hangs himself, what do we expect to find?" "A chair or stool kicked away usually. Signs of struggle, perhaps?" "Précisément. And yet here we find no such chair. The desk is too far away, undisturbed. So how did Victor Beaumont reach the beam to secure the rope?" Dubois looked troubled. "I had assumed perhaps he stood on something that was later removed." "Ah, yes, something removed by the murderer to make it appear as suicide." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "But if that is so, why go to such elaborate trouble? Why not simply leave the object in place? It would make the suicide more convincing, n'est-ce pas?" Before Dubois could respond, Dr. Harrington returned, his expression grave. "Most interesting, Monsieur Poirot. I believe you may be correct in your suspicions. You have found something?" "Indeed. Upon closer examination, I discovered traces of petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes that are not entirely consistent with death by hanging. Additionally, there is slight discoloration around the lips that the initial examination missed. I took the liberty of testing the stomach contents more thoroughly. And there are traces of a substance that suggests poisoning, a fast-acting toxin, possibly a conatine or something similar. Death would have occurred within minutes of ingestion." Dr. Harrington paused. "In my professional opinion, Victor Beaumont was already dead, or very near death, when the rope was placed around his neck." Inspector Dubois went pale. "Good God, then the hanging was staged?" "So it would appear," Poirot said quietly. "The murderer wished us to believe in suicide, or at the very least in a simple murder by hanging, but the truth, she is more complex." Dr. Harrington departed, promising a full written report, and Poirot turned his attention to the decanter on Victor's desk. He lifted it carefully, holding it to the light, then removed the stopper and sniffed delicately. "Cognac, yes, but perhaps something more?" He corked it again and wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief. "This must be tested, Inspector. I think we shall find that it contains traces of the poison." "But anyone could have added poison to the decanter, any of the household, any of the staff." "Non, non. Consider, if you please. The decanter sits here, in Victor's private fitting room. Who had access? Who would know of his evening habit of taking a glass of cognac?" Poirot began to pace. "And who would have both the knowledge and the opportunity to obtain such a poison?" Dubois pulled out his notebook. "We must investigate chemists, shops, doctors who might prescribe such substances." "By all means, investigate, but Poirot thinks the answer lies closer to home." He paused by the window, looking out over the street. "Tell me, Inspector, what have you observed about the behavior of our suspects since the death?" "Devereux has been nervous, certainly. Keeps asking when the salon can reopen, when he can access the financial records." "Because he fears his embezzlement will be discovered." "And Madame Beaumont?" "Composed as always. Perhaps too composed for a woman who has just lost her husband. Or perhaps merely a woman who has learned to conceal her emotions." "And Leo Beaumont?" Dubois hesitated. He grows more agitated with each passing day. This morning, when I visited, he was pacing his room like a caged animal. He demanded to know when you would solve the case, said he could not bear the waiting. Ah, oui? Most interesting. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The guilty man, he often wishes the investigation to end quickly before all is discovered. But so too does the innocent man who cannot endure suspicion. You suspect Leo? Poirot suspects everyone and no one. The little grey cells, they must have all the facts before reaching conclusions. He turned from the window. But certain patterns are emerging, n'est-ce pas? The poison suggests premeditation. The staging of the hanging suggests both knowledge and cold calculation. This was not a crime of passion, Inspector, but of careful planning. And yet the quarrel between Leo and Victor, that suggests passion. Peut-être? Or perhaps it suggests something else entirely. Poirot collected his measuring tape and notebook. There is still much to discover. I wish to speak again with each of our principals, this time with different questions. Over the next 2 days, Poirot conducted a series of interviews that left each participant visibly shaken. He questioned Julien Devereux about his knowledge of poisons, about his movements on the evening of the murder, about the exact nature of his financial arrangements with Victor. He asked Isabelle Beaumont about her sleeping draught, about the end of her affair with Delacroix, about what she truly knew of her husband's habits. He pressed Leo Beaumont about the content of his quarrel with Victor, about matters of inheritance, about long-held grievances. Each interview added small pieces to the puzzle, yet the complete picture remained frustratingly obscure. Poirot returned to his flat each evening and sat in his favourite chair, his eyes closed, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, allowing the little grey cells to work undisturbed. On the 4th day, he summoned Inspector Dubois to his flat. I believe, mon ami, that the time approaches when all will become clear. But first, there is one more experiment Poirot must conduct, one more question to answer. What question is that? Poirot's eyes gleamed with the light of certain knowledge. The question of conspiracy, Inspector. For you see, I do not believe that one person alone could have committed this crime. The staging, the timing, the knowledge required, no. This was the work of more than one mind, more than one pair of hands. Dubois looked startled. You believe there was more than one murderer? I believe, Poirot said carefully, that there were those who acted and those who saw and chose not to prevent. In the eyes of the law, they are not the same, but in the eyes of justice, that is a more complex question. He rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the London street below, his mind working through the final permutations of the puzzle. Soon, very soon, he would gather them all together and reveal the truth. But first, he must be absolutely certain. In matters of life and death, there was no room for error. The little grey cells had nearly completed their work. Chapter 5. Stitches in Time. Hercule Poirot had always believed that the careful application of pressure could cause even the most guarded individual to reveal truths they wished to conceal. It was with this principle in mind that he set about his strategy for the 5th day of the investigation. He began with Julien Devereux, whom he encountered in the salon's office, surrounded by ledgers and papers. "Ah, Monsieur Devereux, you are working on the accounts, I see." Devereux looked up, his face drawn with fatigue. Someone must keep the business in order, even now, or perhaps especially now. Mais oui, though I understand from Inspector Dubois that the accounts have been of particular interest to the police. Poirot settled into a chair, uninvited. These irregularities, £3,000 over 2 years, was it not? Devereux's face flushed. I can explain those entries, Monsieur Poirot. They were not what they appeared to be. Vraiment? Then perhaps you will be so kind as to explain them to me. Victor had personal expenses, items he did not wish traced directly to him. Gifts for certain ladies, payments to ensure discretion about various matters. He asked me to disguise them among the business accounts. Devereux's voice was bitter. I was to be his accomplice in deception, you see, while he received all the glory for the business we built together. These ladies, you have names, receipts? Some. Victor was careless about such things, but I kept records. For protection, you understand. I understand very well indeed. Poirot studied him carefully. And yet Madame Beaumont has told the inspector that you and she have been seen in conversation several times recently. Urgent, private conversations. Devereux went rigid. Isabel and I have known each other for 8 years. Is it so strange that we should speak? Not strange, merely interesting. Poirot rose. You will provide these records to Inspector Dubois, s'il vous plaît, all of them. His next interview was with Isabel Beaumont, whom he found in the small sitting room, a piece of embroidery lying untouched in her lap. Madame, I have just spoken with Monsieur Devereux. He tells me that you have had several private conversations with him in recent weeks, urgent conversations away from prying eyes. She did not look up. Julian has been a friend during a difficult time. Ah, yes, your affair with Monsieur Delacroix, that ended some months ago, did it not? And yet Victor became suspicious of something else entirely in the days before his death. He saw you and Julian together, n'est-ce pas? Now she did look up, her face pale. Victor saw nothing. He imagined things, suspected shadows. Or perhaps he saw the truth that you wished to hide. Poirot's voice was gentle but relentless. Monsieur Delacroix has told the inspector that Victor confronted him, speaking wildly of conspiracies, of his wife and business partner, plotting against him. At the time, Delacroix thought Victor was being paranoid. But he was not paranoid, was he, madame? He had discovered your true liaison. Nothing. It was nothing. Poirot allowed the silence to extend, watching as she struggled to regain her composure. Finally, he spoke again. Leo Beaumont has told Inspector Dubois that you came to him the night before Victor's death, that you were in distress, speaking of desperate measures. Is this true? Leo said that. Her voice was barely a whisper. But he swore he would not... She stopped again, her hands twisting together. Would not reveal your conversation. But you see, madame, in a murder investigation, such promises cannot be kept. Poirot left her visibly shaken and proceeded to the floor above, where Leo Beaumont occupied a small but comfortable room. The younger man was indeed pacing, as Dubois had described, and whirled around as Poirot entered. Have you come to arrest someone at last? This waiting is unbearable. Patience, monsieur. These matters require careful consideration. Poirot settled himself in the room's single chair. I have been examining Victor's will. Most illuminating. Leo stopped pacing. His will? What has that to do with anything? Everything, perhaps. It seems that Victor left the bulk of his estate to his wife naturally. But there is a codicil added 3 months ago, a substantial sum, £5,000, left to you, with the curious stipulation that it is in recognition of designs and contributions not previously acknowledged. Leo's expression shifted from surprise to confusion. Victor left me money, but that's... I had no idea. You did not know of this bequest? How could I? Victor never spoke of such things. Leo's voice grew harsh. He certainly never acknowledged my contributions while he was alive. And yet 3 months ago he made this addition to his will. Why, I wonder, did he choose that particular time? Poirot's eyes were intent. Perhaps guilt, finally, began to trouble his conscience? Or perhaps he sensed danger and wished to make amends before it was too late? Nothing. I don't know. But Leo's face suggested otherwise, and Poirot filed away the observation. I have also spoken with your family's solicitor. He tells me that after your parents' death there was a trust fund established for you, but somehow, through legal maneuvering, Victor gained control of those funds and used them to expand his business. Leo's face went white, then red. How did you... Who told you that? Records, monsieur. They are most revealing to those who know where to look. This would have given you considerable reason to resent your brother, would it not? Resent him? I hated him. The words burst from Leo with shocking violence. He stole my inheritance, belittled my work, took credit for my designs. Yes, I hated him, but I did not kill him. And yet you were overheard arguing with him the day before his death, about stolen ideas, about justice never being served. Yes, we argued, but that was all. I left him alive in that fitting room, alive and laughing at me as he always did. Poirot rose slowly. You left him alive. But you saw him later that evening, did you not? Leo's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes held a mixture of fear and defiance. I think, Monsieur Leo, that you saw something that night, something that, for reasons of your own, you chose not to report. Poirot moved toward the door, then paused. The question is whether silence makes one an accomplice or merely a witness. He descended the stairs to find Inspector Dubois waiting in the salon, his expression troubled. I've completed the additional inquiries you requested, Monsieur Poirot. The chemist in Knightsbridge confirms that someone matching Devereux's description purchased a quantity of aconite 6 weeks ago, claiming it was for eliminating rats in the salon storage rooms. Ah oui, most interesting. And the sleeping draught that Madame Beaumont took? Prescribed by her physician, Dr. Thornley, but he notes that the dosage was unusually strong, enough to ensure she would hear nothing throughout the night. Convenient, n'est-ce pas? Poirot stroked his moustache. Too convenient, perhaps. There's more. I've spoken again with Delacroix. He admits now that Victor did confront him, not about the affair with Isabel, which had long ended, but about something else entirely. Victor had seen Delacroix speaking with Julian Devereux at a club and became suspicious. He accused Delacroix of conspiring with his wife and business partner against him. Delacroix found it absurd at the time, but now... Dubois trailed off meaningfully. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The web tightens, Inspector. Each thread connects to another, forming a pattern that grows clearer with each revelation. He drew a deep breath. I believe the time has come. Tomorrow evening we shall gather them all, Madame Beaumont, Monsieur Devereux, Monsieur Leo, and yes, even Monsieur Delacroix. In Victor's salon, in the scene of the crime, Poirot will reveal the truth. You know who killed him? I know much more than that, mon ami. Poirot's voice was grave. I know who killed him, how it was accomplished and why. But most importantly, I know the terrible chain of events that led to that moment when Victor Beaumont drank poisoned cognac in his private fitting room. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and dread. Tomorrow would bring the denouement, the moment when all would be revealed and justice, such as it was, would be served. Chapter 6. The Seam Exposed. The evening was cold and damp, with fog beginning to settle over Mayfair's elegant streets. One by one they arrived at the Beaumont salon. Isabel Beaumont, pale and composed in black. Julian Devereux, his face haggard with strain, Leo Beaumont, his movements jerky with poorly concealed agitation. Henri Delacroix arrived last, his diplomatic bearing unable to entirely mask his unease. Inspector Dubois had arranged chairs in a semicircle in the main salon, facing a single chair where Hercule Poirot now sat, his hands folded precisely in his lap, his green eyes moving from face to face with penetrating attention. "Thank you all for coming," Poirot began, his accented voice clear in the silent room. "I know this is most distressing, but Poirot believes that the truth, however painful, is always preferable to uncertainty." "Get on with it then," Leo muttered. "Tell us who murdered my brother." "Ah, yes. The murder." Poirot rose and began to pace with measured steps. "Let us first consider what appeared to have happened. Victor Beaumont was found hanged in his locked private fitting room. The door was secured from within, the window too small for escape. It appeared, n'est-ce pas, to be suicide, or perhaps murder made to look like suicide." "We know all this," Devereux said impatiently. "What have you discovered?" "Patience, monsieur. Poirot must build his case with order and method." He paused by the window. "The police investigation revealed many interesting facts. Monsieur Devereux had been embezzling funds, or so it appeared. Madame Beaumont was conducting an affair with Monsieur Delacroix. Leo Beaumont had quarrelled bitterly with his brother just hours before the death. Each of you had motive, opportunity, and means." Isabel's voice was steady but low. "Are you saying we all killed him?" "I am saying that you all appeared to have reason to wish him dead, but appearances, they can be most deceiving." Poirot turned to face them. "Consider the embezzlement, £3,000 over 2 years, a tidy sum, but not so large as to be immediately obvious. And yet Monsieur Devereux kept meticulous records of these transactions. Why, if one is truly stealing, one does not document one's crimes so carefully." Devereux's jaw tightened. "I told you those were Victor's personal expenses." "Précisément. And I have verified this with the vendors in question. Victor was indeed using business funds for private matters, and you, monsieur, were covering for him. The false embezzlement charge, it was a red herring, meant to point suspicion at you." "But who would—" Devereux began, then stopped. "We shall come to that." Poirot moved on. "Now the affair. Madame Beaumont and Monsieur Delacroix conducted a liaison that ended, or so they claimed, before Victor's death. But the hotel proprietor places you there the evening before the murder, having a heated argument. What was the nature of this argument, madam?" Isabel's composure cracked slightly. "Henri had just told me that Victor knew about us, that Victor had confronted him, threatened to expose us both. I was distraught, naturally. And what did you do after this distressing news?" "I went home, took a sleeping draught. I told you this already." "Ah, yes, the sleeping draught, prescribed by your physician in a dosage strong enough to render you completely insensible for the entire night. Most convenient for someone who did not wish to hear or to witness certain events." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "But let us move to the physical evidence, the hanging itself." He walked to the corridor leading to the private fitting room. "The sailor's knot used was most elaborate. Monsieur Devereux, with his naval background, would certainly know such a knot, but so too might others who had access to books on maritime matters, books such as those in Victor's own library." "You're saying someone framed me?" Devereux's voice rose. "I am saying that the knot was chosen deliberately to direct suspicion, but here is what the murderer did not anticipate: Dr. Harrington's expertise. For you see, Victor Beaumont did not die by hanging. He was already dead, or very near death, when the rope was placed around his neck. He was poisoned." A collective intake of breath filled the room. Leo half rose from his chair, then sank back down. "Poisoned with aconite," Poirot continued, "administered in his evening cognac, the same aconite that Monsieur Devereux purchased from a chemist in Knightsbridge 6 weeks ago." "For rats!" Devereux protested. "I told the chemist it was for rats in the storage rooms." And yet there were no rats, according to the staff. Another red herring, another piece of false evidence carefully planted. Poirot turned to face Julian Devereux directly. "But you did purchase the poison, did you not? At someone's request?" Devereux's face went white. His eyes flickered to Isabel, then away. "I begin to see," Poirot said softly, "the true pattern. A pattern not of one murderer, but of two. Two people working together, bound by a secret that neither could reveal without destroying the other." "That's absurd," Isabel said, but her voice trembled. "Is it, madame? Consider, Victor discovered your affair with Monsieur Delacroix, which had ended months before, but that discovery led him to watch you more carefully. And what did he see? Secret meetings with Julian Devereux, glances exchanged when you believed no one was watching. He confronted Delacroix, speaking of conspiracies of his wife and business partner plotting against him. Delacroix thought him paranoid, but Victor was not wrong, was he? Your true forbidden love was with Julian Devereux, and Victor had discovered it." The silence that followed was absolute. Isabel and Devereux stared at Poirot as though turned to stone. "The meetings you thought were secret, the glances exchanged when you believed no one was watching, Victor saw them all. He confronted you, threatened to expose you, to ruin the salon's reputation and both your lives, and so you plotted together. Julian obtained the poison. Isabel ensured she would have an unbreakable alibi through the sleeping draught. And on that night, one of you administered the poison to Victor's cognac." "No," Isabel whispered. "No, that's not—" "But wait." Poirot held up a hand. "There is more to this tragedy than two conspirators, for you see, there was a third person involved, not in the planning perhaps, but in the execution." He turned to Leo Beaumont. "You witnessed the poisoning, did you not, monsieur?" Leo's face had gone grey. He said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. "You saw what happened," Poirot continued relentlessly. "Perhaps you entered the fitting room at the crucial moment. Perhaps you saw Julian, or Isabel, with the poison. And you made a choice. You chose not to intervene, not to save your brother. Instead, you helped stage the hanging, using your knowledge and your opportunity. Why? Because of the inheritance he had stolen from you, the years of humiliation, the cruelty he had inflicted. You saw justice, rough justice perhaps, but justice nonetheless, being served." Leo's hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles went white. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "He was my brother, but he destroyed me, bit by bit, year after year, when I saw what was happening." He stopped, unable to continue. Poirot's voice softened slightly. "When you saw what was happening, you chose revenge over mercy. You helped them stage the suicide, knowing that your silence made you complicit. 3 people, bound together by guilt and necessity, creating an elaborate fiction to hide a simple, terrible truth." The room was utterly still. Inspector Dubois moved forward, his expression grim, his hand moving toward the handcuffs at his belt. Epilogue. Scissors laid down. 3 weeks had passed since that fog-shrouded evening in the Beaumont salon. Hercule Poirot sat in his comfortable flat, the morning newspaper folded precisely beside his breakfast tray. The headline spoke of the trial that would begin in a fortnight. 3 defendants charged with murder and conspiracy in the death of Victor Beaumont. Inspector Dubois had called the previous evening with the final details. Julian Devereux had made a full confession, hoping perhaps for leniency through cooperation. He had indeed purchased the poison at Isabel's desperate urging. Victor had discovered their affair 3 days before his death and had flown into one of his artistic rages, threatening to destroy them both publicly to ensure that Devereux would never work in London again, that Isabel would be cast out of respectable society. In Devereux's confession, Poirot detected the unmistakable tone of a man who had acted not from cold calculation, but from desperate love and fear. He had loved Isabel Beaumont for years, watching her trapped in a loveless marriage, seeing the quiet desperation beneath her composed exterior. When Victor's threats became unbearable, when Isabel spoke of ending her own life rather than face public shame, Devereux had seen only one solution. Isabel herself maintained a dignified silence, speaking only through her solicitor. She neither confirmed nor denied the affair, neither admitted nor contested the charges. Her stillness in the face of catastrophe struck Poirot as the behavior of one who had moved beyond caring what became of her. Perhaps in some dark chamber of her heart she welcomed the punishment as release from the prison her life had become. Leo Beaumont's role remained the most troubling aspect of the case. He had not administered the poison, had not planned the murder. But he had witnessed the poisoning, entering the fitting room to find Julian pouring the tainted cognac while Isabel stood frozen in the doorway, and had made his terrible choice. Instead of preventing the crime or summoning help, he had waited until Victor drank, until the poison took its swift effect, until death claimed the brother who had tormented him for decades. Then, in a grotesque mockery of fraternal duty, he had helped Julian stage the hanging, creating the elaborate fiction that nearly succeeded in deceiving everyone. His confession to Inspector Dubois had been raw and anguished. He spoke of years of accumulated rage, of stolen inheritance and stolen credit, of artistic dreams crushed beneath Victor's contempt. In that moment, seeing his brother's murderers, he had felt not horror, but savage satisfaction. Only afterward, in the days that followed, had guilt begun its corrosive work. Poirot rose from his chair and moved to the window, gazing out at the London street below. A light rain was falling, washing the cobblestones clean. 3 lives destroyed. And for what? A man who, for all his genius, had been cruel and selfish, blind to the suffering he caused. The law would take its course. Devereux and Isabel would likely hang, their forbidden love ending on the scaffold. Leo would face a lesser charge, accessory, after the fact perhaps, or conspiracy, but his life too was effectively over. The salon had closed its doors forever, the elegant establishment where art and artifice had mingled now standing empty, its windows dark. Poirot thought of the red herrings that had littered the case like false threads in a tapestry, the embezzlement that was not embezzlement, the affair with Delacroix that had masked the true liaison, the threatening letters from Alaric Stone that spoke of professional jealousy but nothing more sinister. Each had been, in its way, a genuine element of Victor Beaumont's complicated life. Each had pointed toward guilt without revealing the true pattern. The detective's mind turned, as it often did after a case concluded, to questions of justice and morality. Had justice been served? Legally, yes. 3 people who had conspired in murder would face the consequences of their actions. But in some larger sense, Poirot wondered whether Victor Beaumont's own cruelty had not earned him his fate. He had stolen from his brother, belittled his talents, threatened innocent lovers with ruin, used his artistic genius as a weapon to wound those around him. Yet murder was murder. and the law made no exceptions for victims who were themselves unkind. The little grey cells recognized this truth, even as Poirot's more human instincts understood the desperation that had driven Julian and Isabel to their terrible choice. There was a knock at the door, and his manservant entered, bearing a card on a silver tray. "A visitor, sir, a Madame Colette." Poirot raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Show her in, if you please." The head seamstress entered, dressed in black as she had been on the day they first met. She carried herself with the same dignity, but her face was marked by sorrow and perhaps something like relief. "Monsieur Poirot, I have come to thank you." "To thank me, madame? That is unexpected." "For finding the truth. Victor was a genius, and I loved him as one loves a difficult artist. But he caused great suffering, and I—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I knew about Julian and Isabel. I saw their glances, their careful distance that spoke of desperate closeness. I said nothing, because I understood why they sought comfort in each other. Victor's cruelty extended even to his wife." "You did not suspect they would go so far?" "Never. But now that it is done, now that the truth is known—" She met his eyes directly. "I sleep better, Monsieur Poirot. Is that wrong of me?" "Poirot is not a judge of such matters, madame. He discovers truth. What people feel about that truth, that is beyond his province." After she left, Poirot returned to his chair and his precisely arranged breakfast. The tea had grown cold, but he drank it nonetheless, his mind returning to that elegant salon in Mayfair, to the private fitting room where artifice and reality had met in fatal conjunction. Order and method had solved the case, as they always did. The little grey cells had discerned the pattern beneath the carefully constructed lies. But in the end, what had been accomplished? 3 lives destroyed, a business ruined, a family shattered. Justice served, perhaps, but at such terrible cost. Hercule Poirot, who valued order and symmetry above all things, could find no symmetry in this conclusion, no neat resolution that satisfied both law and morality. There was only the messy reality of human passion and desperation, of choices made in darkness that could not be unmade in light. He straightened the newspaper on his tray, aligned his teacup precisely with its saucer, and prepared to face whatever case would next demand the attention of his little grey cells. The world continued, indifferent to individual tragedy, and so too must Hercule Poirot continue in his pursuit of truth, however uncomfortable that truth might be. And so ends The Tailor of Artifice, a story of elegance and illusion where devotion turned to deceit, and even the finest craftsmanship could not disguise the flaws beneath. This story was written by us in homage to Agatha Christie, inspired by the refinement, wit, and human frailty that shaped her timeless mysteries. But the plot, the voice, and every thread of detail are entirely our own creation. If you've stayed with us until the final moment, thank you, truly. You're the heartbeat of this channel, the reason these stories continue to find life. Tell me in the comments, what do you feel Café Stories captures most faithfully about Poirot's world? And what could we make even more unforgettable next time? Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and may your evenings always be filled with good stories and warm company. This is Alfie, signing off from Café Stories.